This is Coffee Number 5. I'm your host, Lara. Hi, everyone. Welcome back to Coffee Number 5. And today, maybe we're going to talk about something that it doesn't sound as sexy, but it's important. It's really, really important. So if you know me, you know that I talk about this a lot. If you had a mini audit with me, or you interview us as an agency, you know that I talk to you guys about this all the time, which is accessibility. And as unsexy as it sounds, it's super important because there is something that it bothers me as much as a job not well done in the digital world is the people not having the knowledge and service providers not able to inform their clients of what it needs to be done. And as a former educator and as a professional, I feel like I always need to own my knowledge, but I'm always looking for more knowledge. How can I help my clients? And unfortunately, there are a lot of consumer lawyers out there today trying to make some extra money on the side for this little issue that it's called accessibility. So I want to bring you today to an expert. Welcome, Bet. I'm so happy to have you here today.
It's good to be here. Thank you for having me.
And so, how did you get roped into accessibility?
That's a really good question. I had a first career in nonprofit management doing communications pieces. And then in the first financial crisis, 2008, I got downsized and kind of stumbled into freelancing and building websites for people. And one of our clients around 2015, an agency of the state of California, let us know that they needed to make sure their website was accessible. And when we dived in to learn more about what that really involved, it just captured our entire team. All of us realized that we had family members and friends and people that we knew that accessibility impacted. And it just became this sort of purpose-driven piece for us to start doing more with accessibility. And so we've been shifting
let's
for
start
10
from the
years.
beginning. Let's start from the
Yeah.
beginning. What's accessibility?
Yeah. So, if you on a websites, people with disabilities, different types of disabilities, may have encounter barriers. So people don't always use websites the same way when we build them, right? Even people without disabilities might use them differently than we maybe think they are going to. People who have a mobility impairment, for example, they're paralyzed and they can't use a mouse. So think about how you might use a website without a mouse. Typically, you have some kind of adaptive device. So people that are totally paralyzed, for instance, from the neck down, or can't use their hands for a mouse, might use an adaptive device that comes back to keyboard navigation. So there are as many different devices almost as there are people, right? Because they're customized for a specific person's disability. But it comes back to using keyboard navigation, pressing tab and enter to navigate through the website. People who are blind use a tool called a screen reader that reads out loud to them, not just the text on the page or the descriptions of the images that are put on them, but also the context for what's there, what's a heading, and whether it's a button. So there are many different ways that we begin to think about making sites usable for people with all kinds of disabilities, from being hearing impaired, for needing captions, to even things like reading disabilities, and how we put text on a page can begin to impact how people can use things. One of the big ones is motion sensitivity. We have people on our team that have this, right? If you have like lots of motion things that are happening on a site, it can make people car sick, essentially,
Yeah,
right?
absolutely.
So all kinds of ways that, or induce seizures. So all kinds of ways that we begin to think about making sure that everybody that comes to your site, including people with disabilities, can use the site.
Yeah, and I mean, for me, it's part of the user experience, and it's
Absolutely.
something that drives me a little crazy. I have to admit this, that I see a lot of websites that they look very pretty, and they were done by a designer, and there is no user experience. It's all
Right.
only about to make it pretty.
Right.
And when we're talking about user experience, is to understand the customer journey, but also to know that there are people that they are not using the website in the same ways that most of the people are using it.
Right. And, you may have, I mean, you can think about accessibility as really a form of user experience optimization that's considering that you might have customers with disabilities that are a part of that journey. So just like you might have a user persona when you're doing user UX optimizations, persona that is, a 20 something female, middle income, right? Or a certain educational levels, or you might have different personas. Having personas with people that include people with disabilities is just as important.
Yeah,
Yeah, yeah,
absolutely.
yeah.
So, because there are all these plugins now to address accessibility, and I always say it's great because let's be honest, the accessibility law has a lot of gray areas, and as technology is evolving constantly, it's really hard to check the law all the time.
Yeah, well, ADA is what in the United States, what most of the lawsuits come back to. That law was passed in 1990 before we really had commercial lawsuits or commercial websites like we have today, right? So it's all applying that retroactively, and we don't. It's not written into the law. So in the United States, what has happened is we've had these lawsuits brought by consumers that have over time established. I mean, there are some gray areas. There's one U.S. district court circuit that says that you only have to make your e-commerce site accessible if you also have a brick and mortar store, right? So sometimes it can get really kind of narrow. But the thing to remember is that you have to look at the bigger picture, because in the U.S., anybody can file their case in any district they want. And so there are some more some districts and some courts, some states that are more seen as more favorable to people bringing these lawsuits. And those would be like California, New York, Florida, although we are seeing an uptick in places like, Wisconsin of all places, right? So it's an interesting kind of piece. It is the law, and that's been kind of pretty clearly established that it is the law that you need to make your site workable for people.
And
You can't exclude them.
how these plugins work, and
How do what?
plugins for accessibility work.
Oh, yeah. So there are plugins and add-ons for accessibility. Um, you might see them as kind of like just install this bit of code and everything will be okay. Well, those plugins are using automated tools. So automated tools and automated testing in general can only find about 30% of issues. So these plugins and overlays are purporting to find and fix as many things as they can via automation. That's about 30% of the issues on generally on a website. So they're not fixing everything. And those tools also will often conflict or create code conflicts for people that already have adaptive devices on their computer. So for example, they often conflict with screen readers, leading neither tool to work. So I can't tell you how many blind people have
So,
told me that
what
they just block those. They try to block those tools at the root. And now what we see is that those predatory, kind of serial plaintiff lawsuits that are targeting people, about 25% of those every year are now sites that are already running an overlay or a plugin.
yeah.
And we are, it's becoming more and more clear that those lawsuits are targeting those tools in the tech stack because they know it's easy to prove that you knew you should do something about accessibility. You put this accessibility plugin on, but it doesn't fix everything. And it's really,
One of
more of a target
one
anymore than anything.
one of the things that I realize that a lot of people are not understanding out there, that in accessibility there is a big thing that is the color construct contract
Yes, color
contrast.
contrast, right?
Yes, that's a big thing in accessibility. So when you start
Absolutely.
designing your logo, your brand, whatever you design, you need to keep this in mind. And today we have amazing tools already. If you use Figma and there
Yep.
is accessibility measurements they are.
Yeah.
So don't get
So
in love with the color palette that won't pass accessibility, because that is
exactly.
what is going to be really having
Think
issues.
think 2 or 3 times about picking orange as your main color, right? Orange is really hard to match for accessibility. But yeah, so there are some great tools that are out there, but you have to begin to think about it not just in terms of your basic design, your logo and your basic color scheme, but also you need to start building a color contrast check into your regular design and development process, right? So one of the reasons that e-commerce websites are 80% of these ADA lawsuits is that they change all the time, right? You were putting up a new hero every few weeks, or we're putting up new landing pages, we're building new products, putting them all out. But you need to start building color contrast checks as well as other kinds of accessibility checks just in that workflow every single time, right?
Absolutely. Something else also that I noticed a lot is because now you have, when you send email marketing works with blocks of information that comes from your website directly.
Yeah.
And which is a lot of people start changing those images in the website so in their emails it look pretty necessarily. And those,
Yeah.
and as you keep changing and changing, you're affecting the website and the image descriptions and a lot of things.
Yeah. Well, actually, what I see more often in terms of email marketing, but also social media marketing, has to do with people putting up an image that has text on it, right? It has a lot. It's an image, but there's not really a font in there, and so it's just an image. And so, the algorithms can't read that text in the image yet so easily, but
Yeah.
also it's not available to a screen reader. So you need to, if you're going to do that, then you have to make all of that content available somehow for people that need screen readers. Or it's also terrible when people who may not necessarily be 100% blind, but have a visual difficulty, and they need to magnify things,
Yeah.
right?
Well,
So
that's a lot of the problems that I see it, and I deal with this with a lot of clients, and I did in the past, and I know that I will do in the future. That when I create content and beautiful content, they need to be. First of all, you need to make it responsive too, because it's not going to work only in
absolutely.
one device. And you need to be thinking about the magnifying. So, and then you want to use a font that is Google font, so it works in every device. But at the same time, you need to think about this situation. So you want to make sure that the text is in the native platform, and you don't put so much text in images because it will shrink with the image
Yeah,
instead of
exactly.
being adapting. And I know that many companies, they're all about the looks, but we need to think about.
Well, I mean, as long as you're offering some alternatives, right? So you can, I think you're right. There are bigger problems because you got all these different devices, and making things mobile responsive is a problem for all of that. But if you provide that text that you've put in there also in the email, right? So you've got, some kind of text on this image, but as long as you're repeating it or making it available somehow to people, or you're finding a way to put it into the alt text, or as long as you're finding ways to also make it available. But the problem is that people don't do that, or they do it for a few times and then they start forgetting, right? And so it's not a part of their regular process.
Yeah, so let's talk about accessibility, and we talk about websites. There is any other in the digital world? Do we have any other accessibility laws that we need to be aware of, like
Yeah.
in email marketing, SMS marketing, social media?
Yeah, we haven't seen that those kinds of cases here in the U.S. in terms of social media. There are some cases that are very around ADA and emails, but they tend to be more around transactional things, like when people are when it's like a service provider that's sending an email, like a utility or a bank, right? Making sure that when you're sending an email to the customer, that they have a way to access it. But the other piece that we do see that comes up is, as of June 2025, so just a few months ago,
Mhm.
if you sell product or services to EU customers. There's a relatively new law. The European Accessibility Act is the overarching law, and in the EU, then every country has an implementation. Most of those, and that means that if you're selling services or products to EU customers, that your site has to be accessible. There are some exemptions for very small businesses, but
There, but
but
also
also
if you're
but
selling
also your
to,
social media also has to be accessible for
but
the.
also you need to be compliant with all the cookies and all those
Yep.
integrations and
Yeah,
the,
it's just like
the,
yeah, it's
and
just like GDPR. This
yeah,
accessibility law is like that, right? It's you can be a US company, but if you're selling to EU customers, now you have this compliance requirement.
yeah, absolutely. The same of with email marketing. It's very
Yes,
different how we do email marketing in the US than internationally. And
absolutely.
it's the same with SMS. In now the SMS laws are a little crazy. That even every state is a little different.
Yep. Yep, for sure. So there are those laws that are coming, but there are so many benefits. I mean, there's it's a compliance piece.
I
And
know.
I would say, so it is the law. You should do it.
Yeah.
But and it can be expensive to be non-compliant. Often, one of the expense, it's not only that there's legal costs or a settlement or all of that, but also that, often you are then required to make your site accessible on a very short time window, which increases the cost, right? Because you have to do it in a compressed time frame.
Yeah. So
So,
let's talk for a second. For example, a company starting their brand new website. I don't want
mhm,
to give an example of fixing a website because sometimes it's a lot
yep,
harder. Let's start. So someone who's starting their website and they want to go thrifty, maybe they don't want to work with an agency, they want to work with a designer. What are the things that they need to be looking at in order to make sure that they are compliant?
yeah. So, there are things related to accessibility that are design related, things like color contrast we talked about.
Mhm.
There are things that are content related. So things like
Let's explain about this. That we have structures in websites that you have to have H1s, H2,
right, right.
body
So
description. So you need to make sure that even if you're an H1, it needs to be tagged as an H1 so
right.
people can know this is a title, this is a heading, this is a
Yeah.
body.
Yeah, this is the a lot of times people who are not haven't learned yet think of those headings as a way to style text to make text
Yes,
bigger and smaller, right?
yes.
And actually, the H2 can be any size font you want it to be, right? The H3 can be it doesn't have to be
No, but
nested that way.
what
We
people
do it
understand that H1, H2, H3 headings, all these
right,
has
and
a
those are
meaning for someone else.
exactly. And so there, we want to see one and only one H1. That's the title of the page or the product, or the title of that particular web page. And
Or
then,
no, or I mean, it can be a module also when you have multiple modules.
yeah, one and only H1 on the page.
Okay.
All right. And then H2s to structure all the way down the page after that. And then you're nesting things, just like you were writing a high school, essay outline, right? You're doing the Roman numerals, and you're nesting them. So H2, H3. And the reason for this is that I think when people understand how those get used, it can kind of help them understand why to do it. So people who are blind would use their screen reader and say as a way of surfing the content, right? As a way of sort of trying to find what they're looking for on a page, they
Mm-hmm.
would say, read me out loud all the H2s. And
Mm-hmm.
so the screen reader would start reading all the H2s on the page. When they find the one that they're interested in, then they say, okay, now read me all the H3s under that, right? And so they're trying to narrow their way to finding the specific content they want. But if you've jumped your headings around and you haven't properly nested everything, that's going to be really hard. Now the other thing to know is when you properly nest things like that, it's much better for your traditional SEO, right? That's
So
how
much better. I
Google
mean,
and
that's
yeah,
one of the the keys of SEO to
yeah,
nest right and to use the elements right.
right,
And now with
exactly.
all the AI world more than ever.
Yeah, so here's the interesting thing, right? So the AI search stuff, the AI is ingesting pages not in a not looking through so much the code. So like Google and all of that traditional search stuff was looking at the code. They're looking at those H tags. The AI is not so much doing that. It is looking for, it is basically taking screenshots of the page and using optical character recognition. So what that means is that you need to pay attention for traditional SEO. You need to pay attention for your headings and
Yes.
alt text for sure. For AI search, you need to pay attention more to your color contrast. Because if the if they can't read the text, if you
Of
have
course.
really bad text contrast, then they're not going to be able to get that text for using OCR on it. So finding ways that you're using that for AI. So, but
Very
yeah.
cool. So how do you see this ADA look as the world is changing right now and we are evolving in the digital world? How do you think all this will evolve?
Well, one of the things that I'm starting to see is that, let's back up and say, uh, I think sometimes people who are marketers, marketing managers think that people with disabilities is a really small number. And I can't tell you how many times people have said to me, people with disabilities don't buy our product, right?
Mhm.
And the statistics say that in most developed nations, 20 to 25% of all adults have some disability that requires an accommodation.
Mm-hmm.
The latest number in the US that we had was 28%. Now, if you think about it, this is also as the general population ages, the average age of the population ages, that disability number goes up, right? Just you've lived longer, you have more chance of having an accident or an illness.
Yeah.
You develop more disabilities as you age.
I have a
So,
question for you because I
so
saw the other day a plugin claiming that they can adjust for people with ADHD.
let's get back to that. Where I was going was, I think what I see happening for folks is savvy marketing managers are figuring out that this is a huge demographic. It is 20 to 25% in most developing nations.
Mhm.
It is a huge, $500 billion in disposable income in the U.S. Globally, that's $8 trillion. It's a market that you are able to, if you're making your site accessible, it makes it more easier for those people to spend money with you. So I think I'm seeing some of that starting to happen, that brands that are looking to increase their conversions and revenue are looking to accessibility for a demographic that they could tap.
That's amazing. And what about the ADHD that I just asked about? Is that
I think in general, the consensus is a little dubious about those because ADHD is a wide variety of um, symptoms, right? A wide variety of ways that can manifest itself, and so any one thing that claims that is probably not. Yeah, people are pretty skeptical about that. Yeah.
yeah? I was too when I
There
saw that.
are we have for more than a few, and those are relatively new. What we have seen for a long time are fonts that are supposed to be better for people with ADHD, and that's kind of like, yeah, no, not so much. Now there are fonts that are more difficult. Things that are fonts that are cursive, for example, are sometimes really hard for folks. We don't teach cursive in school anymore
I
here in
know
the
that.
States. And so people are kind of making an assumption about everyone being able to read those, and that's not necessarily true.
I know, and it's really hard. I can see people really struggling with the cursive, and also a lot of brands I see that they fall in love with fonts, and they look pretty, but they're really hard to read.
Yeah, and at the end, what's your big goal? Is your big goal, if you have to choose, do you want to look pretty or sell product?
Exactly. I always say the same. That's a personal decision. I won't interfere in that. Beth, I have a last question for you. How do you,
Absolutely.
how do you drink your coffee?
Oh, I am a dark roast black woman.
Oh, okay. I can see that. Okay. Sugar or not sugar? Okay.
Black, no
Black
sugar.
it is. All right.
Yep.
Guys, if you want to buy Beth a coffee, you know what to get her. Thank you so much, Beth. It
Oh,
was
you're
great
welcome.
having you here. And to you guys, I will see you next week with more coffee number 5. Talk
Awesome.
soon. Bye. Find everything you need at larashmoisman.com
or in the episode notes right below. Don't forget to subscribe.
It was so good to have you here today. See you next time. Catch you on the flip side. Ciao, ciao.